We continue now at the top of Daf Pei Vav Amud Aleph in Maseches Baba Basra. This is Baba Basra Daf 86a. On the previous summit, the Gemara asked whether the kalim of the lokeach, the vessels of the lokeach, are they kona? Do they acquire in the rishus of the mocher? Do they acquire when they're in the property of the mocher of the seller? And the Gemara is in the middle of bringing a proof from a brayso. So the brayso is talking about a case where the lokeach is bringing workers into his property, and the workers are loaded with produce which he is acquiring. And the brayso now continues and says, Pirkon, if he unloads them, meaning he takes the produce off the backs of the workers, v'hichnisan l'soch beso, and he brings them into his house. So then the brayso says, Pasak ad shalom madad, if they set a price but they didn't yet measure, so ein shnein yecholin lachzor behen, so they're not able, both parties are not able to retract. There's a kinyan over here because it's in the property of the lokeach, it's in the property of the buyer. But madad, but let's say they measured it out, ad shalo pasak, but they never set a price, so then shnein yecholin lachzor behen, so then they're both able to retract, because as we said on the previous summit, if they did not yet set a price, so nobody's really relying on the fact that this kinyan is actually going to go through. And so the Gemara now brings its proof. From the fact that the kalim, from the fact that the vessels of the mocher and the property of the lokach are not kona, the Gemara here is assuming that you're unloading this produce, and the produce is in the vessels of the seller, but in the property of the buyer. And it's said over here that the buyer does acquire, meaning the vessels are irrelevant. They're insignificant compared to the property. That's what the Gemara means to say, that the vessels of the mocher from this brisa are not kona in the rishus of the lokeach, and that's why the lokeach is kona the produce, because the vessels are irrelevant. So we can understand. So kelev the lokeach nami b'rishus mocher lo kana. So if you have the vessels of the buyer also in the rishus of the seller, that also is not going to be a kinyan. That's the proof that the Gemara wants to bring. And the Gemara continues. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says b'shashafchan. That's not the case over here. When they're unloading the produce from the workers, it's not staying in the vessels. They're actually spilling it out. They're pouring it out, and therefore it's directly on the property of the buyer, and it's no proof whatsoever to the issue of kalim of the lokeach in the rishus of the mocher. And the Gemara continues, Ikbid Rava. So Rava was makbid about this. He said, you can't give such an answer. Why? Because midi shafchan katani, does it say anything in here in this brayso about pouring, spilling it out? Pirkan katani, it says they unloaded them. It doesn't sound like they spilled anything out, so you can't give that answer. And so the Gemara answers, Alamar Marbar Ravashi, rather Marbar Ravashi says, B'mesachli de tume, the brayso is talking about bundles of garlic which are not in any containers in the first place, and therefore there are no containers, so again, it's no proof whatsoever. And the Gemara continues, Amar Huna Berei de Marzutra Ravina, Huna the son of Marzutra said to Ravina, Michti Ladasi, Pirkan Katani, it says over here that he unloaded them. Mali Pasak or Mali Lo Pasak, what's the difference if they set a price or didn't set a price? Meaning once it's unloaded and it's in the rishus, it's in the property of the buyer, why do they have to set a price? There already seems to be a kinyan over here. So Amar Lei said back to him, Pasak Samcha Daite. If they set a price, so then everyone's relying on the idea that this sale is actually going to go through. It's considered to be a finalized kinyan. But Lo Pasak, but if they never set a price, Lo Samcha Daite, people do not rely on that, and that's why the kinyan cannot go through in such a case. And the Gemara continues, Amar Lei Ravina Ravashi. Ravina said to Ravashi, Tashma, come near the following proof in terms of whether the vessels of the lokeach and the rishus of the mocher are kona or not. The Rav Shmuel da Amri Tarvayo, because Rav and Shmuel, they both say, Kelev shel Adam kona lo b'chol makom, the vessels of a person they acquire for him anywhere they are. And the Gemara says, Lasuye mai, what does that come to include when we say in any location, b'chol makom? Lav Lasuye rishus mocher, isn't that coming to include the rishus of the mocher? So you see that the kinyan is effective. And the Gemara says, Hasam over there, we can say it's different, the Amar Lei, because he says to him, meaning it could be that that case over there with Rav and Shmuel is talking where the seller says to the buyer, Zil Kani, go and acquire. If he says Zil Kani, so then already we would say that it's a good kinyan even if it's in the rishus of the mocher, but it wouldn't be a proof to a regular case. And the Gemara continues, Tanan Hasam, we learned over there in the Mishnah, Nechasam Sheeshlan Achrayas Niknin Bekesef Uvishtar Vechazak. If you have property that has Achrayas, meaning you have land that's acquired with money or with documents or with a Kinyan Chazaka, Vishain Lan Achrayas, but if it is property without Achrayas, without a lien, meaning it's movable property, Ein Niknin Ela B'Meshicha. The kinyan is only going to be with Meshicha, with pulling this movable object, this metaltalin. And the Gemara continues, Besura masnu lo lahashmaita mishmei de Rav Chisda. In Surah, the teaching that we're about to learn was learned or was taught in the name of Rav Chisda. But Pumbedisa masnu lo mishmei de Rav Kahana, and Pumbedisa, they taught it in the name of Rav Kahana. V'amri lo, and some say mishmei de Rava. It was in the name of Rava. And this is the teaching. Now, the point over here is that this Mishnah that we're bringing, the Mishnah is from Maseches Kiddushin, this Mishnah says that movable objects are acquired through Mashicha. And so the teaching is as follows. Lo shanu ala dvarim she'ein darkan lahagbia. When we say that a person can acquire movable objects through Mashicha, through pulling it into his Rishus, that's only if it's something which is not normal to lift it up. You wouldn't normally do a Hagbah. Avol devarim she'darkan lahagbia, but something which it's normal that you just lift it up, so b'Hagbah in b'Mashicha lo. So if you do a Kinyan Hagbah, if you lift it up, that's a Kinyan. But if you do Mashicha, it's not a Kinyan. The point over here is if it's something that you can lift up, Mashicha is not a Kinyan. Yosef Abaye v'kamar lahashemaita. Abaye was sitting and he was saying over this teaching. So Eisvei Ravada Bar Masna le'Abaye. Ravada Bar Masna asked Abaye a question from the following brisa. Hagonev kis b'Shabbos. It says if somebody's stealing a wallet on Shabbos, chayiv, he's going to be chayiv. Now the point over here is when you're stealing this wallet on Shabbos, you may be violating Shabbos. Now if you violate Shabbos, that's an isser that's associated with the death penalty. And usually if you do something where you're going to get the death penalty, you're not going to pay money as well, because we apply the rule of kamle b'deravamine, you get the greater punishment. So the point over here is the person stealing the wallet on Shabbos is chayiv to pay. Shekvar is chayiv begeneva kodem sheyavo lidei iser Shabbos, because he actually was chayiv in stealing before he violated Shabbos in any way. The point is the moment he picked up the wallet, he's making this kinyan, he's stealing the wallet. He later violates Shabbos by taking it into a different rishus, and so therefore there's no kamle b'deravamine in this case. However, let's say he's dragging it out, so now he doesn't really make a kinyan until he brings it into his rishus, and at that same moment he's violating Shabbos, so then he's exempt, meaning he doesn't have to pay any money, Sharayis or Shabbos ugeneva boin ke'echad, because the violation of Shabbos and the stealing happen at the same time. And so over here it seems like he's dragging it out. That seems to be a Kinyan Mashicha. And so the Gemara asks, V'harekis, but when it comes to a wallet, Debar Hagbohu, that's something which you can lift up. V'afilu hachi, kani b'Mashicha. Nevertheless, this Bryce is saying the person acquires it through pulling it. And the Gemara continues, Amar Lei, Abaye said back to Ravada Bar Masna, b'misna, we're talking over here where he's dragging it with a rope. The Gemara says, Anonami b'misno kamin. Ravada Bar Masna says back to Abaye, I also was saying that you're dragging with a rope. What difference does that make? It's still a Mashicha. Amar Lei, so Abaye said back to him, B'midi de boy misna. What I mean to say is that this is a wallet, it's very large, it requires a rope, therefore it's not something you would normally lift up. That has to be the case of the Brisa, and that's why the Mashicha is a good Kinyan in that case. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, proof from the following brisa. This is a brisa we quoted earlier. B'rishus mocher, we say that if the item is in the rishus, in the property of the seller, lo kana ad shiagbiena, there's no kinyan until the person, the buyer, lifts it up, o ad shiotziena mirishuso, or until he brings it out of his rishus. That sounds like you're doing a mashicha. And so the Gemara says, Alma, we see, midi debar hagba, that this is something that could be lifted up, because it says ad shiagbiena, and iboi bahagba kanile, v'iboi v'mashicha kanile. It sounds like the brisa is saying you could do whatever you want. If he wants, he can be kona with Hagbah by lifting it up. And if he wants, he could be kona with Mashicha by pulling it. That seems to be from the Brisa. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, Litzdadin katani. You have to learn this Brisa Litzdadin to its sides, meaning it's talking about two distinct cases over here. And it means as follows, Midi debar Hagbah beHagbah, when we're talking about something which is lifted up, then you make the kinyan by lifting it up. Midi debar Mashicha beMashicha, something that should be pulled, that's something that you make a kinyan by pulling it. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Pei Vav Amud Beis.